Hello everybody, we're here for the third and final vlog in our His Dark Materials read-along. We hope you've been reading along, obviously, I know some of you have. And I think we should probably start by mourning the loss of my book. So I took this on holiday and it was quite hot. And it turns out that the glue melted on my book and it fell apart.
To the UK standard, obviously.
Yeah, it was, exactly. Fine in UK weather, not so good on continental Europe. So a little trigger warning for anybody who doesn't like to see ruined books, but this is what's happened to my book. It's completely fallen apart. I'm not very popular at home because it's not actually my copy.
Oh no!
It's my wife's. So they might have to get another copy. But it does prove that I read it.
Yes.
Or at least
too vigorously.
Yes,
obviously.
I really went for it. Where do we start with the Amber Spyglass, Kiran?
I just feel really emotional every time I read it. Those final few chapters just are such a gut punch, and the impact just doesn't lessen at all. So I suppose my first question to you was: were you satisfied?
I don't know how you couldn't be satisfied. I mean, this is interesting because I think before reading it, I know that there are a lot of readers who are not satisfied by the third book or have lots of issues or sort of contentions about how it finishes and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't feel that way. What I enjoyed was that it's pretty epic from start to finish.
Yeah.
The stakes are always absolutely up here. There's a lot going on in a lot of different places with a huge cast of characters. But it also takes time to develop a whole new world. So the storyline of Mary Malone and the Mulefa, or
that's what the audiobook says.
So okay, there we go. Mulefa. Is almost like an entirely new and separate world and storyline, and there was quite a nice bit of time, I thought, taken to explain that.
Yes, he really revels in all the details that actually probably most editors would be like, oh, you don't need that, it's not relevant to the plot. But it all feels totally relevant in building this really complete many-world fantasy that really this escalates into so fully in this book. And it also has such political intrigue. Reading it this time, it really struck me like Robert Harris level in the Magisterium, all those scenes with... and then Father Gomez being sent after Mary Malone and the kids and things. It really did feel like a thriller at points, which is not something that I'd necessarily registered.
No, you do. You have this sort of assassin.
Yeah.
Well, not even just an assassin.
Priest.
Yeah, assassin priest. It's sort of almost Dan Brown-like at times. I mean, of course, not not the same kind of thing at all. But that, as I know what you mean, that kind of pace and. It's very, in terms of plot, there is an awful lot of plot. A lot happens. Yeah. And that's why I think when I first picked up the book, when I thought I was going to cram read all three of them in a month, and I thought, oh God, no, that is quite big. Maybe I should give it some time.
Well,
and you can see why it's so big.
Look, in the edition that has all of them in, it's actually basically half the book is the Amber Spyglass. So yeah, it's a long thing.
It's a long old thing. But I didn't feel... It didn't feel long whilst reading it. It felt, as I say, epic. It just sort of, right from the off, you were like, okay, here we go. It is a bit like the third part in any filmic trilogy where you're like, okay, stuff's going to happen, stuff's going to go down, because you've got to resolve all of those storylines. And because this has a huge religious basis, I suppose, and we're thinking about Paradise Lost and sort of the journey into the world of the undead, or the dead rather. I mean, that's pretty that's pretty epic. It's pretty big.
It is, which is why I think the Mary Malone chapters work so well, because you're being moved at such a pace that almost those are like breathing rooms. Even though you're discovering things about dust, obviously. I can't remember what they call it, like straff or something. There's like another word for it that they have, but yeah, obviously with the Amber Spyglass and everything. And he's telling you that it's important because the title is the Amber Spyglass. So whereas some people might skip through, you just don't. There's just not a chapter in this that you skip through, because it all matters. He makes it matter.
And I think you realise how much it matters as all of those threads start to come together towards the end, and you realise, oh, that's why, that's all there. That's why you realise the importance of things.
Sorry.
No. So why don't you come and join us? You may remember from previous videos.
Luna,
who almost made an appearance, is now thinking about coming into the video. It's been in many ways these vlogs have been more about her than about the Amber Spyglass. She's gone into a cupboard.
Will's demon.
Yeah, she is. Oh my god, that would be amazing.
Kajama.
If it turned out I actually had a demon.
Yeah.
Anyway, she may make an appearance later. She may not, but we will carry on. The character of Mary Malone, I think that's really interesting because having this sort of almost separate storyline, and then I remembered that the stage adaptation got rid of her completely.
Yeah, which I hadn't remembered. I saw those, I think I was about 14 or whenever it was. I'd be able to work it out if I knew which year it was. But it was, I just assumed that they were in there, but then how would they do the Malefa?
The Malefa, exactly. Very hard to stage.
Yeah.
So I think that was the reason why they jiggled things around a bit, and it was Serafina Pekkala who sort of became the serpent character, the sort of the tempter.
The tempter.
Yeah, because I guess they just... I would love to have been in the rehearsal room where they tried to create a Malefa. I mean, of course, that's pre-Warhorse, so maybe if they'd done the adaptation a little bit later, they may have found a way to get some actors attached to some wheels and throw them around the stage.
Excellent.
Well, who knows? In a future production, we may see the Malefa take to the stage. But no, I think she's a very interesting character, isn't she? Because she's very rational and scientific, but she undergoes almost a very spiritual experience, doesn't she, with those creatures and in that world.
Yes.
And then realises her sort of importance as the story goes on.
Well, I think she realises she swapped one kind of didactic thinking from being a nun to another kind of didactic thinking, to being a scientist, saying there must be rational structures around everything. And what the Malefa show is there is a whole other way to structure a society. I mean, for a start, their bodies are structured. They don't have central spines. They're in this kind of diamond formation. But also their society, in our society, being independent is kind of an ultimate goal. But they're very codependent, and they see being independent on your own as a weakness. And so insofar as even when she's climbing the tree, they're panicking because she's going further and further away. And so I think there's a lot in this book about how there are other ways to think, other moral codes, which is kind of been evident from the first book with people like Yorick thinking murder is good and honourable. But in this book, he really pushes that. There's one bit that really struck me when Lyra and Will are going down to the world of the dead. And there's a toad-like creature that's like injured. And you might not have noticed this because I don't know why this has stayed with me, but basically they have a debate with the Gallivespians about whether they should put the toad out of its misery. And the Gallivespians are saying, yes, we definitely should. But Lyra says, oh, but what if in its order of thinking, being alive and in pain is better than being dead? And it starts to sort of destabilise all the things that we take as for granted, that it's, better to be cruel to be kind and things like that when it comes to an injured animal. But he starts to destabilise all these things we take for granted in our moral, ethical codes.
Yes, as you say, we have a lot of moral assumptions.
Yes.
And if you actually pull the rug from under those and go, well, hang on, think about that anew. And you mentioned the Gallivespians there, who obviously are living on a completely different scale to everybody else that we meet in the book. And so in introducing these different worlds and characters, it's very easy to create lots of characters that are basically sort of a twist on what a human is. But to have these Gallivespians who are completely different in scale, who therefore, of course, will have a different view of the world entirely.
Yes.
I think is very, very clever. Yeah, I'd forgotten them up until then, but they're great. They're such great characters, both of them.
They are one of the characters that I forget every time I reread it, and that's not because they're not amazing and super interesting. It's just there is so much else going on, but then they do play a very pivotal role, obviously, as everything that he puts in does, and it's just they're again a wonderful triumph of imagination. These sort of like hand-high ninjas, basically.
I had a vision of them becoming the hit Christmas gift one year, because who wouldn't want a hand-high ninja just to go around kicking ass for you?
Maybe like with their spurs removed.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I wanted to mention as well Mrs. Coulter, because she has been a character, obviously, that's been important throughout the books. But again, I think it would be really easy to create a two-dimensional sort of malevolent force in the book.
Yeah.
And I thought that in the third book you get this whole new perspective on her, I still don't trust her for the first half of the book. You're still like, oh, what's the angle here? And then you slowly start to realise that she is beginning to not repent, but to realise the true order of things and how
Yes.
she's erred.
Yes, and just that bit where Metatron, lovely name, Metatron looks into her soul and sees nothing redeemable. And just, it's so sad because she wants him to find something redeemable, but at the same time everything relies on him not. So she's really relieved, but at the same time she's like, no, I'm just an evil, horrible person. And that's where her redemption comes, is realising that she cares, that she's been seen as horrible. And obviously at the beginning when Lyra is taken from her in the first few chapters, and just her crying out for her daughter, and it's just, I found her so redeemable in this book, which is not something you expect reading through. You think, oh, she's going to have a great downfall, I'm going to cheer when she dies. And instead you're just weeping.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite. I think that's quite an incredible switch. I mean, this is of course what fiction can do, is that you can take a character, or actually not just fiction, you can happen in any art form, I suppose, but you can, you take a character that you despise and are scared of for much of a book, and then you can end up caring about them almost more than some of those other characters that you may have taken to your heart initially.
Yes, and I think you still despise her and you're still scared of her, but you also care. So it's quite a feat, because he just makes you understand her so clearly in that final bit where she goes to the magisterium. And then
we don't want to give. I suppose we're assuming that people have sort of read along, aren't we? We don't. I mean, there's not much to give away. But just in case you're watching these videos and thinking, should I read these books? Let me just say that as somebody who doesn't usually read fantasy, doesn't usually, and is far from being a child anymore, unfortunately, I absolutely adored reading these books, and I'm now in the process of reading them to my kids. And they are. So I've read the whole of the Harry Potter books to my kids, and they're a very different reading experience, I find, from reading stuff out loud. You really discover something about writing that's slightly different to when you just read it to yourself. And it's a tougher reading experience for sure, and it's definitely tougher for them to take it all on board. But it is because I think it is filled with detail, filled with a richness, and there's a lot of themes and images that come from other works.
Yes.
Which, if you're scholarly, then you would know, but if you're a sort of 10-year-old, you probably wouldn't.
Yes.
But they are totally getting caught up in this world. They are, and they're always asking questions whilst we're
That's
reading.
so nice.
And they're asking good questions.
Yes.
So if you've read ahead and you know what happens, you're like, oh, good question. Well done.
Yes. Well, he manages to make you think without confusing you, which I think just shows his skill as a storyteller. He's never talking at you. He's sort of taking you along always. And I think that's why kids respond well to it, because they don't like just sort of being told this is what's happening. They like to kind of really feel enveloped in the world, and he does that really well, I think.
I think as well in the way that the book questions authority. So Lyra questions authority obviously as a character all the way through the book, but the whole book questions the idea of either academic authority or religious authority, and I think that's probably quite attractive to any child.
Yes,
to kind of go,
definitely.
Why do I have to do all this stuff?
Definitely. And the authority as a character, I mean, that's the abiding image for me when they discover the authority in that image. I don't know how much to give away or not, but if you've read the book, that image where Lyra and Will come across the authority, that is what stayed with me.
Yep.
Every reread since my first read, because I read this when I was 10 or 11, so a lot of it went over my head in a way, but I got other things from it. But that image is just so powerful and strange and heartbreaking, and I remember thinking even at the time, I was like, oh, he went there, oh, he showed God. And just sort of thinking how brave. And
he did go there, and I suppose there are a lot of people who didn't like that.
No, but you can see why. I can see why. I'm agnostic, so this plays perfectly to my feelings about organised religion. But I can definitely see if you are of a religious persuasion that it would be, well, it's blasphemous if you take it, if you follow the book to a T. But that said, I have friends who are Christian who've read and loved the book, and I think it's just, you can take what you want from it. It can just be read as a fantasy as well.
Now that we've finished all three books, very quickly, how excited or trepidatious are you feeling about the TV series that's going to be made?
I think it's going to work really well as TV. I think a lot of the best storytelling at the moment is in TV. I think the many worlds will work far better in TV. I mean, nobody says that the film wasn't a huge disappointment, The Golden Compass. Like, Philip Pullman himself is very open about that, but I'm hopeful.
Why do you think the film was such a disappointment?
They just simplified it
too
much, and it's not a simple book, and it worked. I thought the film worked as an adventure book story, but I don't think it worked as a visioning of the Northern Lights or Golden Compass or whatever they called it. It wasn't an accurate or fair representation of the book.
So BBC, we're looking at you directly now. Please don't mess it up.
down.
I don't think they will. I think you're right.
No.
I think longer form TV programmes now are able to do things that films can't, and it's bound to have a decent bit of money behind it. So I think it'll look good, and if they cast it well, which again is another thing, because everyone's got ideas about how things should be cast. But fingers crossed.
I do think Nicole Kidman was an excellent Mrs. Coulter.
Yeah.
I was down with that.
Maybe they could get her back.
Yeah,
and moving on to what this is all leading up to, of course, which is the Book of Dust, Part 1, La Belle Sauvage. What are we expecting? What do you think you're going to get from this next book?
I mean, if reading these has taught you anything, it's to not expect, because your expectations will be entirely undermined and then surpassed. So I'm just so excited because I have no expectation other than it's going to be amazing. I just think he knows how much this world means, because it means as much to him as it does to readers, and he's talked about it as an equal, which I think is perfect because, as you said, getting to the end of this, you're perfectly satisfied. So doing another sequel wouldn't be right. It needs to be its own thing, and with the amount that he's got set up already, there's just so much there to plumb. Like, the fan fiction for his Dark Materials must be insane. I might actually go and read some to tide me over until the Book of Dust comes out. But I just trust him. Oh yeah.
Well, I tell you what I trust is that he's taken his time in writing it, and that he doesn't have to have written it.
No.
But it's clearly something that he wanted to do, and so I have good feelings about it. And also what's encouraging, I think, for me personally, is that having just read the original trilogy, I would very happily read another book set in that world.
Yes.
Whereas, rather than sort of feeling a bit full and sort of needing a bit of time off, I would very happily jump back in again, because they were far easier to read than I expected. And I don't mean that they're simple at all, because we've spoken about just how complex they are. But I thought they were, they're well structured, they're well written, and I think a lot of the problems that I was expecting from having heard reports from other people just didn't feel that way to me. So so they were wrong.
Yeah. Anyone who says these books aren't incredible is wrong.
There we go. I think that's probably a good place to leave it. We've got biscuits because it's our final video together, so we're going to enjoy biscuits. We obviously hope that you have enjoyed watching these little read-along videos. Links will have been popping up above our head throughout this video to take you to the earlier ones, but also to take you through to the discussion videos that Kiran did with Martha Greengrass. The final one of those will be coming very soon, in fact in a couple of weeks, and then a couple of weeks after that, the Book of Dust arrives. So if you are, check with your local Waterstones, because you might find that there are special events, reading groups, there may even be early openings so that you can get hold of your copy before anybody else. But let's just keep our fingers crossed that it's as good as we hope it might be, and we hope you enjoy it too. Cheers. Bye.